Hi, my name is Lorraine Watry and welcome to my studio. I am a watercolor artist and I've worked with watercolor for 26 years now, and I thought I would start a new series of videos where I go over different tips, tricks, and techniques for working with watercolor. And hopefully these short videos will help you in your journey, and if you have a question or a technique that you would like to see, please comment below and I will try to accommodate that in a future video. Hi, in this video I am going to talk about creating motion in water, and I had a question about how that is done, and so I just have a couple examples here. This is a scene with rocks and a river, and the water is flowing around the rocks, and then this one is a waterfall where the water is created with a soft, blurry effect, and that makes it look like it has motion. So there's a couple things here that I'll kind of break down in some smaller little samples, and this can also apply to waves or the ocean. Any kind of motion that you're doing can be done this way. So I will start by using some masking fluid, and I'm going to have to break this video up into a couple sections because I need to let these areas dry. So I will have some stop motion, and I'm just quickly drawing some shapes. All right, so for this one I'm going to just put some rocks in, and I'm drawing a lot darker than I normally might, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. And then I'll pretend that maybe there's a rock here and there's some water that's flowing down in there. And I'm not working from an image, so this is all just from my imagination. So in this scene right here, I would want the water to look like it's flowing around these rocks and then coming down into this area. And so some of that is going to be the marks I make with my brush, and then also how I apply any masking fluid that I might want on that area. And then for this one, I'm going to do basically like the waterfall with the soft edges. So I will have an upper edge to my waterfall that is kind of straight. I guess it could have some rocks up in here. Maybe I'll have some rocks coming down right in there, maybe one rock right there, and just create a quick scene with some rocks. All right. So the falls are going to be coming down this direction around the rocks. And in order to give it that feeling, again, it is how I paint the color on, and then any other marks that I make. So I'm going to do a little bit of masking, and I'll be right back, and I'll speed this section up so that you can see how I'm applying the masking fluid, and then it will have to dry, and then I will continue with the painting. Okay, just a quick information here. I use the PBO drawing gum when I'm trying to show something on a video because it's easier to see because it has blue in it. But when I am doing my masking for my own paintings, I like the Winsor and Newton colorless masking fluid. So this is not what I normally use, but it works well for this. Now that the masking fluid is dried, I am going to go ahead and paint in some water, and I will start with the waterfall or the river at the top with the rocks, and I have the blue mask already on there, and then same down here, and I am going to use I guess sort of greens and blues because the original image that I painted a river sort of like this was similar. And so I'll use a New Gamboge with some ultramarine. Not that the colors necessarily matter, but just so you know what I'm using. And then I'm going to start with my lightest value. So I will paint in the lighter green parts of the water. And I'm just going to go over the different areas back here. And I can change color as I'm moving down. So maybe it's got a little bit of yellow in there, or maybe it goes a little blue. So I'll grab some cerulean. And this is all wet on, or not wet on wet, this is wet on dry. And you could paint this in sections if you have water that's really detailed. So I believe in the original painting that I did, I painted the blue in, let it dry, and then painted some green, lighter green around it. So my colors didn't blend as much as they are right now. And I can come back in and put a little bit of cerulean blue up in here just to add that color in that area as well. And so I will bring that down kind of quickly. I went over my rock there, but it wouldn't matter in the actual painting if I got some color on the rocks, because they would be mostly dark in the painting. And then as I come down to the bottom piece down here, I'm actually going to lighten my colors. I'll use a little more blue because there may be a more reflection of the sky happening in the water down here. And so I want to make sure that I show that. And then I can even leave some of the white appearing in there as well. And maybe just a little bit of the green, and I'll bring a little bit of that on this side as well. All right, so I need to let that dry, and while that's drying, I will go ahead and start this one. Now this one is, the waterfall is coming over the falls, and I'm going to paint it wet and wet because I want it to feel frothy and like there's action happening, and so it won't have some of the hard edges that this one will have up above. I did mask some areas in this one, but I'm going to be leaving more of it white than I have masked. And I'm pulling out some burnt sienna, and I have the ultramarine blue already out, so I'll go ahead and use that. And then I will be getting some clear water on my brush. And I am actually going to paint right over where the rocks are. And I won't worry about getting this whole thing covered, but just mostly the middle area to give you an idea of what I'm doing. And this section up here could be other rocks, it could be trees that are back there, but I'm not going to worry about painting that. All right, and then it depends on how much time is available. And I'm making a gray, and then I may use a little bit of some cerulean in that gray here and there. And I am painting on lighter colors. And again, I would be working from an image. I normally don't paint without an image. It helps me to know what the colors are, where things change in value, basically the overall look of the falls. It is kind of fun to just imagine it and place it in there without having an image, but the image can really help me because I'm trying to make it look like a realistic scene. All right, so I have that lighter color in there, and when I was stroking the color on, I was doing it in the direction of the falls. So if there were maybe a rock right here, let me draw that in right quick. And this is a little bit on damp paper, so it's not going to show up real well. Then as I come off to the side right here, I might actually have the water take an angle on that side because it's flowing around this rock and then it's going around the rock that would be right here. So the rocks will change the direction of the water, but in general, because it's falling down in this particular falls, then it's going to have that downward motion. So that's the first pass on both of those. So I will dry those, and then I will come back and do a little more on both of them. Oh, actually, on this one, you could go ahead and put in your rocks once it had started to dry a little bit, or you could wait and do those once it has dried. But because I want some of those edges of my rocks to feel soft focus, I will, let's see, I can do this guy because the upper edge of the rock will be hard, and then the lower edges can be soft, because that will show the motion of the water too, with that rock edge looking like it's got frothy water around it. Make it a touch darker. And then I'll show you one where the rock would be completely soft, and I don't know that that works as well, but I'll go ahead and show it to you. This one has got soft edges, and you can even have it look like some of the water is falling over the rock itself. Okay. And I could imagine there's a small rock kind of behind the water here. And I think this rock over here has got, yeah, it's got an edge where it's dry, so I can go ahead and paint the, oh, it's pretty much dry everywhere. So if you had that situation, then where the rock has met the water, then if I want some soft edges, I can come in next to the edge that I want to soften with a little bit of clear water, and I can let that blur into the waterfall by just using some clear water. And probably this under edge would also be soft, because I can't imagine, unless maybe it's sticking out over the water somehow, that it would have a harder edge there. Okay. I can bring that down. All right, so there's just a little bit of variety in how you can apply the rocks to that. Now, this one has started to really move into the water, so if that's something that you didn't want, you could use a brush that's just barely damp. After this has the rock has lost some of the shine on the surface, and just lift a little bit around there, and you can get some of that color to sort of move back where you want it. All right, so I'm going to dry these, and I'll be right back. So I forgot to have my glove on a few seconds ago. I started to wear a glove on my left hand so that when I'm holding the towel that I use to dry my brush, I am not possibly getting some of the pigments that are a little more dangerous, not dangerous, but not good for your health, possibly on my hand. And cobalt would be one of those. It's a heavy metal. And it's just something I've thought about. I've worked with watercolor for 26 years now, and it's probably a good idea just in case. So I've started wearing a glove, and now I am going to do the next section. So this is the water that is in a river. It's going around some rocks. And this video, again, is about creating motion in the water and how you do that. So I am going to use some of the same colors that I used before, just to make it easy. And so I'm using ultramarine blue with a little bit of New Gamboge. And now as I do the next layer, I'm going to start looking for places where in the water there might be movement happening, and there's darker values that help give the idea of movement. So in this part of the water, there would be water flowing down through this section, and in the original painting I did of this, there was motion from the water and darker lines that I could see that were helping create the look that it's kind of swirling around the rock and coming this direction. And then there might be shadows that are happening in the water around the rocks, and so that can help give you some definition to the water. And then as it comes down over this little rock right there, then there are some places where the water would be in shadow compared to the water maybe up in here. And as it comes down around the rock right in there, and then as it hits the bottom, it's a little hard because of the size of drawing that I'm doing here, or painting. As it hits the bottom, you start to have it flatten out again, and so those lines that I was creating coming down this direction, now they might swirl in a almost flat angle to what we did have a few seconds ago. So it would depend on the water that you're doing, what you're seeing. And then I'm going to dry this and pull off the masking fluid here in just a second. But I'll go ahead and do a little down on the bottom one. So basically, when you're creating water and you want it to look like it has motion, it's about finding the shapes and patterns in the water that will help give you the feeling that is going over something or that it's moving. So it could be sort of a lazy river that just has a little bit of motion to it, but some of those directional lines or shapes that you might make will help give it the feeling of movement. All right, and so then down on this one, this is dry, but I don't want anything that I add to this to necessarily have a hard edge feel to it. So I can wet sections of it, or I could put some shape down and then soften that shape. So I'm going to get a little bit more of my ultramarine and burnt sienna. A little more, just to give it a few more values happening in here. And again, it's following those same shapes that I had already on the page. And I'm painting around that rock. There might be a shadow right here under this rock. Now this is hard edged, and I can go back and soften it. Now you could have a fall where you have some soft parts to it, and then you could also have some harder edges. So it's not that you can't, it's just that for this one I wanted to create it and make it look like it's soft edged the whole way. So just by taking some clear water and coming right up next to those edges of that darker value that I just put on there, I can soften that. And so this would be one where you can just come in and try or add value here and there, and then soften it, or you can place a little water on the paper and paint into that water. All right, so let me get that. And for this rock, I said I would show you one that is on dry paper. So if I place, now the rocks in a fall with, that is a softer edged fall, aren't always soft edged completely. So I would maybe put this rock in with a hard edge on the upper part of the rock. And then as it came down next to the water, that's where I would start to soften some of those edges. So I'm going to use some water at that bottom edge, and you can even leave some of those little white shapes because that could be spray that's coming up and kind of over the rock area. So the waterfall that has the softer edges is wet on wet, and then applying the color, and then you can come back and add layers to it, but you may need to soften edges, or if you want some hard and soft edges, you could leave it. So I will dry this upper one right quick and remove the mask, and then you can see a little better some of the motion that's on that fall. With the watercolor dry, now I can come in, and so I would wait to remove the mask usually on something like this until I have the water the way I want it, have the values in. Sometimes though I will go ahead and remove the masking because I feel like I can paint around my white shapes, and so I am okay with if I need to make an adjustment somewhere. And so now you can see just taking the mask off gives you another layer of motion. And as long as you do the masking fluid in the direction you want that motion to be, that will influence how everything else is looking as well. So if I had not done the masking fluid the same direction as the lines down here, that would change the look of the bottom part of the falls there. So just be careful that you're really understanding what your river or water is doing before applying your masking fluid. And then I'll just go ahead and pull this off. Sorry about that squeakiness. This is a rubber cement pickup, by the way, and it's usually sold near the masking fluid in a lot of craft and art stores, and it's really helpful to remove mask. Both of these masked areas would then need to be adjustments made to them. I would come back and soften edges here and there. On some of the white areas, you might end up wanting to put some color. Generally with water, I don't do a lot of color, but you might have a white or a lighter area that's actually in shadow, so you might want to paint some color in there to give it some shadow. So in general, this is direction to give you information on how to paint water that's in motion, and it's about looking at the water and seeing if there's a certain shapes and lines that can help you basically tell the viewer which way the water is moving, and looking for highlights and maybe shadows that can affect how that looks. So I hope that helps, and I will keep creating these tip and trick videos, and please check back. And I hope you like and subscribe, and you can find more about watercolor on my website and on the blog that I have on that website. So please check that out, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.